In the same manner that images come to us in dreams, which is substantial proof of extraordinary human creativity, music, too, exists within humans, though for many it is trapped inside, which is troubling because self-expression is as important to maintaining a healthy existence as the intake of food, water, or the echinacea golden seal.
He loved music, not for the effects it had on the body, but for the effects it had on the mind. And he always felt like he had the music inside him. And that sort of troubled him always because making music was something he never accomplished.
You know, the common myth about my grandfather is that he was the eccentric, cantankerous, genius type. And, you know, destined for both greatness and tragedy. There may be some truth to that, but it's not the whole story.
I was a newlywed. The wife and I had bought a modest home adjacent to Max's. He was the kindest man I've ever met. We had this ritual. He'd come over to the shop in the morning and we'd drink coffee and discuss woodworking, sometimes until lunch. Never made any money those days. He told me how much he admired carpentry and guys like me who pursued the trade. He equated it with sainthood, you know, even though he was something of a heathen himself. He truly admired common people.
Maxwell came to the physics department in the fall of 1962. By that time, everyone at the university had heard of him. His work on neuro-gravitational determinism had made him something of a legend in the scientific world. My first encounter with Maxie, his friends called him Maxie, it was an occasion not to be forgotten. I have always had a boyish face, even now, so he mistook me for a student. He started lecturing me on how his bologna sandwich could power a commercial jet. I sort of thought him to be out of his melon. So I told him I was not a student. We became fast friends, and he even shared that bologna sandwich with me.
There was always a new interest consuming him, and he'd take each of these new interests to a much higher level, to a much higher plateau. And one month he'd be working on what to do with consumer waste, and the next month he'd be doing research on how to deliver potable water to developing nations. Always interested, always working on an idea, and all of his ideas had a social connotation.
My parents died in 1965. They worked with the PKI, which was the Communist Party in Indonesia. There was an uprising, and along with peasants, other members of the organization, they were all shot to death by the Indonesian soldiers. So after that, I went to stay with my grandfather, and we had always been close. I was the only grandchild he had. He even built me a tree house, and it was solar powered, and it had running water, and it had a dumbwaiter in it, and this little elevator was great because it took food up and down, the top and the bottom, so I could have my tea parties. He and my grandmother both provided a very stimulating, very nurturing environment, and eventually my granddad left the university so he could be closer to me and Grandma.
There were a number of things that led to his resignation. Apart from working with students, he detested the academic life. He felt it limiting to both faculty and students. And the dean at the time, Martin Howe, was something of a fuddy-duddy who didn't take to some of Maxie's more radical theories. He and Dean Howe had several arguments. One thing led to another, and eventually he left. Much to the chagrin of everyone, except Dean Howell. An interesting side note. Later, Dean Howell was both fired and imprisoned when it was discovered that he was a pedophile.
Improving the social environment and enriching people's lives was the real heart of all of his endeavors. Humanitarian or scientist, I don't know which really came first. He was all of both.
He became consumed with music. I would even say obsessed. And he encouraged me to play. He even bought me a piano and a violin.
There was a time there for a while at the end when he would come over for our ritual, drink coffee, but he'd just stare off blankly into space, looking at nothing. He seemed sort of preoccupied.
I hadn't seen Max for quite some time, and I heard from friends that he was splitting his time between his family and working in his lab, which he referred to as his dungeon, so to speak. And by this time he had acquired a quadrillion patents, so money was really not an object.
It might have been the summer of, or winter in the year of our Lord 1968, when I had a luncheon with him. It was an excited Maxie, the Maxie I'd known long ago. We were at the Chez Lucien in downtown Philadelphia. I had braised endive and a Waldorf salad and grilled asparagus on the side. The grilled asparagus was slightly overcooked. The salad, excellent. Do you know that endive is a relative of chicory, which is occasionally blended in with coffee for a delicious hot morning beverage? That comes from the Dutch word witloaf, which means white leaf. It should be pronounced endive, not endive. Urine smells funny after you eat asparagus.
Bavarian pretzels, without a doubt, the best food on the planet.
Anyway, I was interested in finding out what Maxie had been up to. You see, there were these rumors of his eccentricity and his reclusive behavior, all indicating that he had nothing more to offer the scientific world. So he explained this theory that all human beings have music in them, but some are unable to express it physically. These people, he claimed, are truly suffering by being rendered ineffable. He was developing a device that would extract music from an individual's brain waves and then be interpreted by some sort of synthesizer and ultimately recorded. He called it a
neuromusic something or other. Many thought him to be as crazy as a caterpillar on roller skates.
Yeah, I worked with Max on the project from the very beginning. I always hated the name he gave the machine. Eventually, he let me rename it the Phantasmagoria. Our first experiments went extremely well, although there was some difficulty with the test subject. She wouldn't stay asleep during REM. She had sleep apnea. She was a pianist. She was a friend of mine. We even slept together a few times. Her name escapes me at the moment. When it finally worked, it was amazing. Success. I take partial credit for that.
Max's elation was quite temporary. for the first time in all of his work, it appeared that he might have been wrong.
The other experiments, they didn't go so well.
Maxie was brilliant, but like most people endowed with brilliance, he was not without faults or miscalculations.
My grandfather would have a heaping bowl of ice cream every night. And what is an endive anyway?
I approached Dr. Gruten right out of high school, after the first draft of the whatchamacallit device. I knew there was some money to be made. I could fucking smell it. So I offered myself up as the next test subject.
Pluth Foundry? What a hack. A soulless fiend. He's a fucking chode.
Well, I thought it went well. There was some potentially marketable material. I mean, the whole psychedelic thing was proven to be a huge success. However, Dr. Gruten and the others, what do they know?
It was pretty fucking horrible.
Maxie felt it was a setback. Most people would have quit, but not Maxie.
He devoted all of his time to the musical extraction, what have you. He didn't eat, he didn't sleep. He let my treehouse go all to shit. And I even saw him cry once, and me and Grammy, we didn't know what to do.
I have invested time, energy, and what spiritual people refer to as the soul into the creation of a device that will interpret music from brainwaves. And despite a few minor setbacks, I am getting close to perfecting it. Only the banshee of death can stop me now.
Then came the unexpected.
He was in St. Louis to meet with some engineers regarding a proposed subway that was to carry suburbanites to downtown sporting events. And he usually called Grammy about 3 times a day, and on that occasion he didn't. And about 11 o'clock that night we found out why. It was so gruesome. It was just unbelievable. And we had an idea of who did it.
Well, Hans von Zierberg was an elitist, a classical music purist, so to speak, and he had many, many outbursts. And there's lots of stories about him rehearsing his musicians until they dropped.
Maxie did have an appreciation for von Zierberg. He thought he was one of the best composers of the day. He approached him to see if he was interested in taking part in an early test of the music extraction machine. Well, not only did he decline, he told Gruten to cease all experimenting on this device. He threatened him on the telephone many times, and even sent an intimidating letter.
My dear friend Max, please put an end to your attempts to socialize an art form I hold dear to my heart. The composition of music belongs not in the hands of many commoners, but only in the skilled hands of a master like myself. Cease now, Gruten, or I will remove your heart with a tuning fork, and it will become a permanent fixture on my hearth. Love always, the maestro Hans von Zierberg. This paper is made from 80% recycled post-consumer material.
The police, they did very little to solve the crime, and everyone knows that the maestro Hans von whatever the fuck did it.
After Max was done in by the forces of orthodoxy, I just couldn't drink coffee anymore, not even decaf. I just couldn't bear it. He had so much more to offer the world. The last time we talked, he asked me what I thought about dreams. I told him everything I have comes from dreams, that they're the uncensored imagination. He agreed.
I can still taste that bologna sandwich which he shared with me on our first meeting.
What should have been one of the greatest inventions of the 20th century and now sits behind a display case at Tuscaloosa Museum of Antediluvian Sciences.
Not a day goes by that I don't think of him and the impact he had on my life. Did I tell you about the treehouse he built me?
Einstein, Edison, Tesla, Gruten. I'm sure the history books will rank him amongst some of the great thinkers of the past century. I hope, though, that they don't leave out the fact that he was driven by great humanitarian and social causes.
His love for both science and the human race will probably never be matched by another human being. But we can only hope that it will be.
If one were to choose between love and science, the wise would choose science and the fool would choose love. If this choice were put to me, the world shall call me a fool. The fool is tenacious and knows not when to quit.